What's up guys, my name is Ace, and the Nightfall update for Battlefield 6 is here, and now that I've got a solid amount of playtime on it, I just wanted to talk about what I'm liking and not liking about Nightfall so far. And I also wanted to point out a handful of hidden changes that were made, or at least hidden to me. I don't recall seeing any announcement of these changes before the update hit in the patch notes or anything. So without further ado, let's dive right into this, and let's talk about the main piece of content that was added here. This is the new map, Hagenthal Base. And this is an absolute meat grinder of a map, super linear, tons of narrow corridors and choke points, not a whole lot of room to breathe. Sure, there is some complexity and some flank routes, like there are ways to get around, but for the most part, in my experience with it so far, it's just a whole lot of choke point versus choke point action, locking down choke points versus attacking choke points, maybe trying to get a flank in, but it's really easy to lock the flanks down as well since it's largely just narrow corridors. And this is the type of map that, for some people, they're going to be obsessed with it. This is going to be the only map they want to play. They're going to play this 24/7 for the rest of the life cycle of Battlefield 6. And while I'm happy for those people, I am not one of them at all. I really did not enjoy my playtime on this map, even when performing reasonably well, like leading lobbies, getting far more kills than deaths. Maps like this just don't really do anything for me. There's not enough room to breathe. There's not enough of a big picture dynamic flow to the map. And I just don't find it to be an interesting gameplay experience at all. Sure, it's a change of pace compared to many of the other maps. I know many people like to say that the maps are all like super close quarters and COD-like and stuff, but this is taking it to a whole different level. This is like Shipment in Call of Duty, for instance, which I'm also not a fan of in Call of Duty because it's the same sort of story. It just doesn't do anything for me because there's no sort of like big picture strategy or very little big picture strategy or thought. It's effectively just mindless chaos. And so for me, this is generally just going to be a map that I skip if it ever comes up. Now, of course, that's not to say that this is an objectively bad map. Again, there's going to be people that really enjoy this, and that's great. It's just not a map for me, and that's fine. Next, the big gimmick with the Nightfall updates is the Nightfall modes, which are limited time modes, and parts of the map are effectively just completely blacked out, and you have NVGs that you can toggle on and off to help you navigate through those dark areas, or of course you could use a flashlight on your gun as well. And unfortunately, this is just once again something that doesn't appeal to me. I tried it out, and while the game looks kind of cool with NVGs on, it doesn't really do anything special for me. And I also just found that I had to toggle the NVGs on and off so often because it's too bright if you're in a non-darkened area to have the NVGs on. So you're generally not going to want the NVGs on when you go into those lighter areas, but then when you go into the dark areas, you want to put them on. And with the gameplay on the map being so incredibly fast-paced, and with the controls, especially on controller and PlayStation, they're often very unresponsive. It can often feel really clunky toggling those on and off. I just feel like the act of constantly having to toggle the NVGs on and off, while there's also just a bunch of chaos on the map, wasn't really an enjoyable experience for me. I think perhaps it would work a whole lot better if it were just like a regular map in the game, but they made it nighttime and it was very viable to just leave the NVGs on throughout the entire match. Or at the very least, you wouldn't feel the need to be toggling them so often. Something like that I'd be much more into. But the way they've got it set up right now, it's just not for me, and I very quickly just went back to playing regular modes on the regular maps. Now after that, some additional content that we got with this update are two new guns, the CZ3A1, which is the Scorpion Evo, that's an SMG. And of course, I will be doing a much more detailed gun guide, but my initial impressions of this are quite positive. I enjoyed myself with this gun. It's got a very fast time to kill potential, super high fire rates, but it doesn't suffer from the very low magazine size of the other really fast killing, fast fire rate SMGs, the KV9 and the SCW10. So that's a big upside it has over those. And while it does have quite a bit of recoil, I think that's a totally fair trade-off for the power that it has. So I quite like that SMG. The other new gun that we got is actually a secondary. It's a full auto sidearm. This is the VZ61. And with this, I mainly just like the fact that it adds something interesting to the sidearm category. So we've got more variety there. If you want that full auto option, it's there. I don't think this is going to be my go-to sidearm based on my experience with it so far. It's not that it's terrible or anything. It's just generally not what I'm looking for in a sidearm. But again, I will be diving much deeper into that with a gun guide where I'll share all of the stats. Now going off of that, let's talk about the updated weapon progression. And I gotta say, when it comes to the sidearm progression, whoa, it is insanely fast now. and that's very refreshing to see. It's nice to see that you can blast through some levels and get those attachments unlocked and fully explore the sidearms a whole lot faster. And that just seems much more appropriate considering how weak the sidearms tend to be in this game. If you try using it as a primary, you're generally going to have a bad time. So this faster progression really helps compensate for that. And then when it comes to the other progression change, where they adjusted the curve, so the early levels go a lot faster, but overall, to get to weapon mastery, it's only about a 15% reduction to the total amount of XP that's required. At this stage, I will say the early progression feels so much better. I literally made it through something like 11 weapon levels the first game that I used the CZ3A1. And that was really nice because it allowed me to at least get some basic attachments on there right away. I didn't feel like I had to suffer with basically no decent attachments for like a couple hours of gameplay time. It was literally just play one game, and now you've got at least a good handful of attachments to choose from that can help make the gun a little bit better. They may not be the absolute optimal attachments right away, but at least you've got something to work with that makes the rest of the grind more tolerable. Now, in saying that, at this stage, since the update, I haven't gone through and fully maxed out a gun to see what the entire curve feels like. Perhaps I will make an updated video once I get to that point. I'm still a little skeptical about the idea of an overall 15% reduction. That doesn't seem like enough, but I think it really just depends on how much of that is the last 10 levels from level 40 to 50, because you get all of your attachments by level 40. That's what I care about. I don't care so much about getting to that level 50 rank as quickly as possible. I just care about getting the attachments done. So if getting up to level 40 is much more reasonable, and then it's those last 10 levels that are a really big grind, that's totally cool with me, and I'm hoping that's going to be the case. But again, I just need to put some more time into this to fully level up a gun to share a more informed opinion on that. But at least early levels feel a whole lot better, and it does feel far less punishing having to suffer through a gun with like no suppressor, for instance, for a really long time. Now, getting back to content, in addition to the new guns that we also got a handful of new attachments. And again, while I do plan on having a much more detailed breakdown where I actually dive into the stats and comparisons with these attachments, I did want to just share my early impressions of them and the basics of what they do. And the first one I really like, this is the 50 milliwatt violet laser. And with this, it costs 10 attachment points, and it provides a minor improvement to aim down sight accuracy when moving. And just like with the red laser, it's not visible to enemy soldiers. And I think this is great that they're disconnecting that from the blue lasers, because up until now, if you wanted that aim down sight accuracy while moving benefit with a laser, you had to use one of the blue lasers, which are visible, and they also provide a big hipfire improvement, and they cost 20 to 30 attachment points. So it's nice to see them separate that stat, bring it over to its own unique laser that's not visible. And I definitely plan on using this quite a bit. Of course, I've still got testing to do on it, because the way they word things is just kind of confusing here. It says it provides a minor improvement to that, whereas the blue lasers provide a slight improvement. And I don't know if minor is better or worse than slight. So I'm gonna have to do some testing on that, and I'll be sure to share that in a video with you guys in the not too distant future. But at least the idea of this laser, loving it. After that, they've also added 2 different tac light attachments. The first one is while aimed, and with this, it's a flashlight that only turns on when aiming down sight. As soon as you come out of aiming down sight, it turns off. And really the only benefit here is it's designed to blind enemy players, especially in the Nightfall modes. It really is effective for that. Whereas on the flip side, we have the hipfire tac light, which is just the opposite. If you're aimed down sight, it turns the flashlight off, whereas when you're not aiming down sights, it's on in hipfire, and in that case, you're gaining the same benefits as the standard flashlight, which means it helps with your hipfire recovery, and essentially that means while firing, your hipfire spread is going to recover between shots a lot faster, so it's not going to spread out as quickly as if you're not using it. But that one does cost a little bit more than the standard flashlight, whereas the aim tac light costs a little bit less. And those are some interesting additions. I personally don't plan on using them a whole lot, but it's cool that they added them there. I'm all for some variety in that area. Next, we have a new optic. This is the THRDS-1X, and this is a thermal hybrid optic with a 1 magnification, and that means you can toggle between thermal or not thermal. Once again, I don't see myself using this one all that often, but I still think it's a good addition to the game. And then finally, we have the Flash Comp, a new flash hider that they added, which costs twice as much as the standard flash hider. It's a 20-point attachment. And the reason it costs more is it reduces recoil buildup and improves recoil recovery, kind of like the long and lightened suppressor, but in this case, you're gaining the benefits of a flash hider rather than a suppressor. So you will still show up on the minimap for any enemy within 150 meters rather than just like 21 meters with a suppressor. And this is yet another excellent addition to the game. It just provides a little more variety, some more things to choose from. I'll absolutely be using this on some of my loadouts now because it doesn't cost as much as the long or lightened suppressor. So if I want to get that little bit of recoil control out of my muzzle without going with a muzzle brake that spots me in world in real time, this is an excellent option. So big props to them for the attachment additions. Honestly, for me, this is the highlight of this update. These new attachments are going to have the most impact overall on the gameplay experience because they can be used on most, if not all, of the weapons in the game, and they can really change up how you approach your setups and how you play with each of the guns. To me, looking at it big picture, this is much more interesting than a limited time mode or new weapons or even the new map that they added to the game. Now, after that, as I said, there were a couple other additions they made to the game that I didn't see announced before this update anywhere. And for this first one, maybe they even added it before the update and I just haven't checked recently, so somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I did notice after this update, when toggling over to the advanced stats of your guns and attachments, they now provide more details than they did before. So you can see we now have access to the long range damage, so that's the amount of damage we deal in the minimum damage range of the gun. We also have the 3D spot on fire range. So that's the Dorito that pops up over your head when firing your gun if you're not using a flash hider or suppressor. They also show your 2D spot range. That's your minimap spot range, your collateral multiplier, whether or not you can reload while aiming down sight, depending on your attachments, your aim down sight movement speed multiplier, your sprint recovery time, your recoil amounts, and your recoil variation. It's great to say they've expanded on this. Of course, I'm going to be greedy here and ask for more. I would still like to see some more advanced stats than that, similar to how many other games like Call of Duty does it, for instance. I think you should be able to see effectively everything that your attachments are doing to a gun, just to help you make more informed decisions without having to watch a YouTuber or go on like sim.gg, or worse yet, spend hours of time doing meticulous testing in private matches. So I like what they did there, but I'd love to see even more. And then after that, another thing that I didn't see announced previously, but this changed with the update, is we can now customize our profile a little bit more. So you can click on your career total here, and you can select the exact stats that you want displayed on your profile. That's definitely the type of improvement that most players won't really care about, but it's an improvement nonetheless. And with all of that covered, I've just got a few extra points I wanted to make, primarily just talking about my experience with the game since this update. One annoying bug that's been popping up after every match is the user agreement has to pop up and you have to accept that every single time. That's something they've already acknowledged. There will be a fix for that coming, of course. Who knows, maybe even by the time this video ends up going live. Another thing I've been noticing is I'm still running into lobbies that are largely populated with bots and it doesn't fill up with real players by the end of it. And this is with crossplay on. I know a lot of people were doubting me there and saying, well, all you have to do is turn crossplay on and you won't run into this issue. Crossplay is on. I still get into these lobbies like that fairly often, and that's quite frustrating. Although I do kind of like the new bot indicators they added to the game, so it's not just a clan tag. There's a little bit more of a clear label that that player is a bot. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about when it comes to my experience is, before the update in the patch notes, they mentioned a good handful of networking improvements that they were making with this update. And my experience with this after the update, hit detection wise, has been good overall. I haven't really had any serious hit detection issues, haven't noticed any issues there. Instead, the big issue I've been running into that I wasn't running into often at all before this update is I'm getting insta-melted a whole lot more, where it just feels like I'm dying in like a couple frames by a full auto gun. And maybe that's because they've improved hit detection, so people are hitting more shots and therefore I'm dying faster. But I don't think that's entirely the case, at least, because I just noticed far too many situations where it's just like, that gun is not capable of killing that fast. And again, for me at least, this wasn't a major issue before the update. But the way these things tend to work is there's probably people out there that are experiencing the opposite, where they experienced that a lot before the update, but now it's feeling a lot better for them. Networking is a very complex thing that affects everybody very differently. So I am very curious to know what your connection experience has been like since this update. Like, have you guys been noticing better or worse hit detection? Have you noticed this like insta-melt feeling where it seems like you just die way faster than that gun is actually capable of killing? I'm just very curious to hear the responses to that one. And that is where we're going to leave it. Overall, I do think this update was a positive step in the right direction for the game. Not a massive leap though, just a step in the right direction. We've got some nice additions there, some nice improvements to the game. The weapon progression does feel noticeably better, especially on those lower levels, but it may not be enough. And of course, I do want to hear what your guys' thoughts are in those comments down below. Have you guys generally had a good experience with this update, or maybe not? If you enjoyed this one, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.